When you've been the family afterthought your whole life, you stop expecting things like kindness, respect, or even a half-decent bed to sleep on. My name's Adrian. I'm 32, and I've learned the hard way that family doesn't always mean support or love. Sometimes it just means obligation. Like the obligation to show up at the annual family reunion even though you know you're going to spend the weekend biting your tongue, smiling through backhanded compliments, and being treated like the weird cousin who somehow wandered in from a bus station. For context, my extended family is complicated. My dad was the youngest of 4 siblings, and he passed away when I was 16. He and my mom had me pretty late in life, so I was always the youngest of the cousins by a good 10 years. After Dad died, my mom couldn't really handle being around his side of the family much. She slowly faded from the reunions, but I kept going out of guilt. At first, they acted like it was nice I still showed up. Then that slowly turned into me being the charity case. The kid without a dad. The one whose mom ran off. They'd say things like, "It's sweet that you still come even though you must feel so out of place." Or, "We know it's probably hard for you to contribute, so don't worry about the group expenses this year." As if I couldn't afford to split the Airbnb like everyone else. Fast forward to adulthood, and the pattern didn't change. I built a good life for myself, started a small real estate investment company, made some smart moves, and yeah, ended up doing pretty well. But you wouldn't know that if you talked to my family. They still saw me as the awkward tag-along who brought the wrong kind of chips to the barbecue and didn't understand real work. Most of them work in more traditional fields: teachers, nurses, small business owners. All respectable, of course. But somehow, they decided that because I worked with online stuff and didn't punch a clock, it didn't count. Aunt Lydia once said, loud enough for the whole dinner table to hear, "We're just glad Adrian's found something to keep him busy, even if it's not a real career." That stung more than I let on. I didn't correct her. I never do. Let them think I'm the out-of-place misfit in their sea of Pinterest-perfect family units. I've gotten used to it. But this year's reunion was the one that finally broke something in me. And it didn't start with a big fight or a dramatic insult. No, it started with a smell. A moldy, mildewed, air freshener struggling to keep up kind of smell. We always hold the reunion over a long weekend in late spring, usually at some resort or lodge in the mountains that can accommodate our sprawling group. There are over 40 of us if everyone shows up: my aunts and uncles, their kids, spouses, toddlers, the whole chaotic flock. This year, we were at a resort that looked nice enough from the photos. Big cabins, a communal dining hall, plenty of hiking trails and outdoor stuff for the kids. I hadn't even planned to go this year, but then I got a text from my cousin Sarah a week before saying, "Everyone's asking if you're coming. It wouldn't be the same without you." She's one of the few I actually like, so I said yes. Maybe I hoped things would be different this time. I arrived on a Thursday afternoon, just before dinner, after a 5-hour drive through winding roads and a whole lot of patchy cell service. The place was bigger than I expected, like a luxury campground with timber-framed buildings and gravel paths between the cabins. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw everyone already mingling near the main lodge. Lawn chairs, coolers, kids running around. I grabbed my bag from the trunk and made my way over, smiling and waving. And that's when it started. "Oh hey, Adrian," Aunt Lydia said, barely glancing up from her folding chair. "We weren't sure if you were actually coming. You didn't RSVP on the group spreadsheet." "I told Sarah I'd be here," I replied. "Figured she'd pass it along." Lydia made a face like I'd just confessed to skipping a funeral. "Well, next time, try to follow the process, okay? These things don't organize themselves." She didn't ask how I was. Didn't even stand up. No hug. No welcome. Just a comment about a spreadsheet. I brushed it off and said hi to a few others. Most were pleasant enough, surface-level greetings and nods. Nobody asked how I'd been. No one noticed I'd lost 20 pounds or that I'd finally quit drinking last year. I don't think anyone even noticed the new car I pulled up in. It was like I'd materialized from the fog, and they weren't quite sure where to file me. Then came the room assignments. Uncle Dale, who somehow always takes it upon himself to organize these things, stood up and clapped for attention. "All right, folks, here's the cabin layout. Each family's got their own, as usual. Singles, we've got some shared setups, so check the list." He read out the cabin numbers like a cruise director and eventually got to me. "Adrian, you're in cabin 9B. The downstairs room. Should be fine." Sarah caught my eye and winced. I didn't know why until I found it. Cabin 9B wasn't a room. It was a converted basement with a cot and an old dresser. There was a little window half covered in cobwebs and a stale odor like something had died in the ventilation. The floor was concrete with a thin rug that curled at the edges, and the single light bulb overhead buzzed when I flipped the switch. There was no bathroom down there. I'd have to go upstairs and hope someone wasn't showering. I dragged my suitcase down the steps and stood there for a moment, just staring. I'd driven 5 hours, brought wine and snacks to share, and this was what I got. A basement room like some unwanted guest. I was still standing there when I heard footsteps on the stairs. It was Aunt Lydia. Of course. "Oh good. You found it," she said with a smug little smile. "I know it's not the Four Seasons, but hey, you should be grateful we even invited you." Then she laughed, like it was a joke. I didn't laugh. I didn't say anything. I just nodded slowly and set my suitcase down. I could hear the muffled sounds of everyone upstairs. Music, laughter, dinner smells wafting down. No one else came down to say hi or check in. That night, as I lay on the lumpy cot listening to footsteps creaking above me, something in my chest started to tighten. Not from anger exactly, but from the years of small cuts, casual dismissals, and quiet humiliations that I'd let slide. I thought about how no one knew the truth about what I did for a living. How no one had bothered to ask. How none of them knew that 3 months ago, on a whim, I'd bought this entire resort as part of a land bundle deal. The cabins, the main lodge, even the boat rentals. All of it. I own this place. And they had no idea. I could have told them. I could have walked in that night and said, "You're welcome." But I didn't. Because suddenly, a better idea started forming in my mind, something patient, something poetic, something that would make them remember who I was, who I'd always been, and what they'd never seen coming. But first, I had to wait. Wait until they were comfortable, until they'd unpacked and settled in, until they started acting like they owned the place. Because that's when it would hurt the most. If you've never felt invisible in a room full of people who share your blood, consider yourself lucky. The next 2 days dragged by like I was walking barefoot over nails, each moment a fresh reminder that I didn't belong. Not really. I was tolerated. Expected to stay quiet, blend in, smile when spoken to, but never fully accepted. Not once in all these years. And this time, it wasn't just passive indifference. It felt like a performance. Like everyone was reading from some unspoken script about how to remind Adrian he didn't quite measure up. It started at breakfast the next morning. Every cabin had a rotating cooking schedule. It was a long-standing reunion tradition. Each family took one meal across the weekend. You cooked, served, and cleaned. That was the deal. My assigned slot was Saturday morning breakfast, solo. Everyone else had at least one other person to help. But I figured I'd do it anyway. Eggs, pancakes, fruit, the usual. I woke up early, hauled boxes of food to the communal kitchen, and got to work. It was barely 8 a.m. when people started trickling in, groggy, half awake, kids whining, coffee being poured like liquid gold. I tried to keep things light. "Morning, Uncle Dale," I said, flipping pancakes. "Grab a plate." He nodded vaguely and shuffled past me without a word. 10 minutes later, the kitchen was packed. People swarmed the counter like seagulls, scooping eggs onto paper plates, knocking over juice cups, barely making eye contact. "No, thanks. No, this looks great." Nothing. Just grunts and shrugs and muffled conversations about who was hiking where and what time the volleyball game started. I was background noise. Sarah stopped by and said, "Hey, this looks awesome. Want me to help with cleanup later?" "Thanks," I smiled. I appreciate it. She always had that soft spot for me, even as kids. When the others teased me for bringing books to the lake or not wanting to play tackle football, she was the one who sat beside me and listened. But even she looked nervous, like being too nice to me might raise eyebrows. And then came the cleanup. I spent over an hour scrubbing pans and wiping down the counters while the rest of the family lounged outside on the deck, sipping mimosas and slathering on sunscreen. No one offered to help. Not even when I dropped a plate and it shattered on the floor. Aunt Lydia poked her head in then, saw the mess, and said, "Oh dear. Be careful with the dishes, Adrian. We don't want any accidents." I wanted to scream. But instead, I knelt down and picked up the shards, one by one. That night, they hosted a family trivia game in the main lodge. Another tradition. They broke us into teams by family units. Each team had matching bandanas and homemade signs. I was the only solo person. Dale glanced at the sign-up sheet and went, "Huh. Well, Maybe Adrian can be our scorekeeper. Laughter. Actual laughter. I'm fine, I muttered, and slipped out before they even noticed. I sat alone on the back steps, watching the sky turn purple over the treetops. Somewhere inside, someone rang a cowbell and shouted out trivia questions about family history, vacations, childhood memories. I knew the answers. I knew them all. But no one thought to include me. It would have been easier if they'd just said it to my face. You don't belong. But no. They cloaked it in smiles, in traditions, and that's just how we do things. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling of the basement, feeling more like a ghost than a guest. Then came Saturday afternoon, the moment that pushed it all over the edge. We were out by the lake. The sun was out, kids splashing in the water, adults lounging in camp chairs with cheap beer and sun hats. There was a giant cooler of popsicles and sodas, and a Bluetooth speaker playing throwback hits from the 90s. I wandered down in swim trunks and a t-shirt, hoping maybe today would be better. I even brought a bag of chips and some folding chairs I'd picked up in town the day before. Aunt Lydia saw me approach and immediately waved her hand. "Oh, Adrian, don't worry about those. We've already got enough chairs." I stopped mid-step. I figured I'd bring a few extras. There weren't many yesterday. She smiled tightly. "We're good. Maybe just find a spot on the dock." I glanced around. Every seat was taken. Every towel was occupied. I found an empty patch of grass and set up my own chair, a little ways off from the rest. I might as well have been on another planet. A few of the older cousins glanced over, but didn't wave. One of the kids came up and asked if I was the basement guy. I didn't even know how to respond. After a while, someone shouted, "Group photo." Everyone scrambled to line up, parents in the back, kids in front, everyone trying to fit into frame. I stood off to the side, holding my phone, assuming they'd ask me to take it. But no, Dale had a tripod. They didn't need me. I hovered there awkwardly until Sarah waved me over. "Come on, Adrian, squeeze in." As I stepped into the back row, Aunt Lydia muttered, "Do we have room for everyone?" Dale chimed in. "Yeah, let's keep the core families in the main shot, and we'll get extras in the next one." Extras? I didn't even know what that meant. "Don't worry, we'll do a cousin photo after," Sarah whispered. I stepped back, nodded like it didn't matter, and returned to my chair. I watched them all pose and smile and joke with each other. That picture would go in the family newsletter. I wouldn't be in it. Later that night, as the sun dipped and bonfires were lit, someone passed out marshmallows and beer, and Uncle Dale brought out a binder. "All right, time for the annual family budget chat." This was new. Apparently, they'd started pooling resources to plan future reunions, rent bigger venues, and support struggling family members. A sort of informal co-op, Lydia handed out envelopes with suggested contributions. Mine was marked with a sticky note, "Whatever you can afford. We know things might be tight." Tight. I stared at that envelope like it was written in fire. It wasn't even about the money, it was the assumption, the condescension, the little pat on the head that said, "It's okay, we don't expect much from you." I slid the envelope into my pocket and walked away. The breaking point came a few hours later. I was sitting near the edge of the firelight, sipping water, when I heard my name. I mean, bless his heart, but he's always been kind of pitiful, hasn't he? It was Lydia. She didn't know I was close enough to hear. She was talking to Dale, their voices low, their drinks half full. "He shows up every year with his sad little snacks, and that weird car," she went on. "And the basement thing? Honestly, it's more comfortable than what he's probably used to." I froze. Dale chuckled. "I still can't figure out what he does for a living. Some kind of online flipping business? Maybe selling used sneakers?" "Sarah says he's into real estate," Lydia said. But I checked his socials. Nothing impressive. No photos, no house, nothing. "That's because he doesn't have anything," Dale said, with a snort. "I bet he's sleeping in that basement and hoping we'll invite him again next year, just so he has somewhere to go." Lydia laughed. "Well, we're charitable. Family's family." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I sat there, listening to two people I'd known my whole life dissect me like I was some tragic case study. Like I was a stray dog they threw scraps at. I felt something inside me snap. Not loud, not explosive, but cold, quiet. A pressure release valve finally giving way. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the basement, staring at the ceiling. That was the moment I knew. No more kindness. No more silence. No more patience. They'd gotten comfortable. They'd settled in. Which meant it was time. Not just for payback, but for a reckoning. I pulled out my phone and opened the resort management app. There it was, my name, listed as owner. Every cabin booked under the family's last names. Every reservation under my control. I tapped on the screen and hovered over the cancel button. But no, not yet. It had to be public. It had to be seen. Because they needed to feel it. Every step of the fall. So I made a plan. And waited for Sunday morning. Checkout day. The day they'd least expect it. I didn't cancel the reservations that night. I could have. I could have tapped a single button and sent every confirmation spiraling into chaos. 40 people scrambling to figure out where to go, luggage in hand, phones ringing the front desk that didn't exist anymore, because I was the owner now. But something held me back. Not doubt. Not pity. Something deeper. Maybe it was the part of me that still wanted to believe in redemption. Or maybe I just wanted to make sure they truly saw me before I made them leave. Really saw me. But first, I had to see myself again. It's hard to describe the quiet ache of being invisible. It doesn't hit like a punch. It's more like water dripping steadily onto the same spot of your soul, day after day, year after year, until it hollows something out. That's what it felt like lying on that cot, listening to them laugh around the fire while I stared at the unfinished basement ceiling above me. I thought about Dad a lot that night. How he used to say, "You don't need to be loud to lead. You just need to know when to speak." I hadn't spoken in years. Not really. Not about who I was, what I'd built, what I'd overcome. I let the narrative shape around me instead. Adrian the afterthought. Adrian the guest. Adrian the one with the lopsided smile and invisible wallet. I guess it was easier to stay quiet than to risk being seen and still rejected. But now I was done hiding. I spent Sunday morning alone. While the others were packing up and saying their prolonged goodbyes, I slipped out before breakfast and drove into town. There was a coffee shop there, small, warm, a quiet place tucked between a bookstore and a bike rental stand. I sat in the back corner, ordered a cappuccino, and pulled out my laptop. I opened my investment dashboard. Resort, $2.3 million appraised. Acquired, $1.7 million in a package deal with 3 other lakeside properties. Monthly revenue, rising. Summer bookings, full. Next year, already 40% reserved. They didn't know any of it. They didn't know I'd spent the last 5 years flipping forgotten motels into high-end retreats. That I'd built a small team. That I owned a fractional stake in 2 travel tech startups. That I'd been featured, quietly, in a few industry podcasts under my LLC name, which had nothing to do with Adrian. And they certainly didn't know that while they were handing me envelopes labeled "Give What You Can," I'd been wiring a 6-figure renovation deposit to the construction firm revamping the main lodge next month. No one had asked, so I never told them. After an hour, I closed the laptop, tossed the last sip of coffee, and walked along the lake trail until I could breathe again. The air was clean. My head was clear. When I got back to the resort around noon, the vibe had shifted. Families were finishing brunch, dragging suitcases to cars, kids crying about leaving. I saw Dale chatting with the front desk manager, asking if they could lock in next year's dates. I watched Lydia hug 3 different people goodbye, like she was hosting the Oscars. No one noticed me at first, until Sarah did. She rushed over, holding a small Tupperware of leftover fruit salad. "Hey, I was looking for you. You okay? I didn't see you this morning." "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. "Listen," she added, glancing around. "I overheard something last night. Lydia was saying stuff about you again, and I wanted you to know, I don't think it's fair." I nodded. "Thanks, but you don't have to worry about it." "No, I do," she said, her voice cracking. "Because you've always been there for these reunions. And they treat you like you're some burden." There was a silence. A real one. Not the awkward kind. An honest, heavy pause between 2 people who finally saw the same truth. Then she asked, "Are you going to come next year?" I looked out over the lake. "That depends." "On what?" I smiled. "On whether anyone remembers to invite me." She didn't laugh. She just looked at me, like she finally understood something she hadn't seen before. That night, after most of the families had left, I stayed behind. Technically, I had the right to do whatever I wanted with the place. I was the owner. But this wasn't about legal power. This was about something else. Something personal. I walked through the cabins, one by one, checking windows, making mental notes of repairs still needed, appliances to replace. I wasn't just inspecting property. I was taking back my presence. At some point, I wandered back into cabin 9B. That basement room. I stood in the middle of it, breathing in the stale air, remembering how small I'd felt when I first walked in. How much smaller I'd felt after Lydia laughed and told me to be grateful. I looked around, then pulled out my phone and opened the work chat. I messaged Logan, my operations lead. New priority. Renovate 9B. Turn it into a luxury suite. Best furniture. Lakeview window if possible. Deadline. 2 months. He replied in 2 minutes flat. You got it, boss. Want to name the suite? I paused, then typed. The afterthought. It made me laugh. Not in a bitter way, but in the way survivors laugh when they realize they're no longer surviving. They're living. That summer, I didn't go to another reunion. There wasn't one. At least not at the resort. When Sarah texted me to ask why no one could book it for the next year, I told her. New policies. Owner's discretion. I didn't say it was me. Not yet. I wasn't ready. The rise wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about reclaiming my story. Instead, I focused on building. I expanded the lakeside property, added paddle boards and fire pit rentals, hired a local artist to redesign the cabin interiors. I started offering curated retreat weekends, writing getaways, couples escapes, remote working hubs. Business boomed. And me? I changed, too. I started therapy. Opened up to a few close friends about what that family had done to me, year after year. I started dressing better, not to impress anyone else, but because I finally felt like someone worth showing up for. I stopped saying yes to people who saw me as a placeholder. I learned to say no, and mean it. By the fall, my name was quietly showing up on hospitality trend blogs. One influencer stayed in my flagship suite and called it the best-kept secret on the lake. Bookings tripled. I didn't share any of it on Facebook. I didn't start posting humble brags or quote graphics. I just lived. Until one day, in late October, I got an email. Subject, Family Reunion 2026. Let's plan early. It was from Dale. It was a group email, of course. Every relative was CC'd. He went on about how last year's venue was perfect, how they should lock it in again before prices went up, how maybe they'd even do a 5-day reunion this time. Does anyone remember the name of that resort? I think it was Evergreen Pines. People replied in threads. Love that place. Yes. The cabins were so cozy. Can someone reach out and get pricing? Lydia, of course, chimed in with. I'll take the lead on booking. They loved us last time, smiley face. I stared at the email for a while. I could have replied right then. Hit reply all and typed. Hi Lydia. I own it. Your stay is officially over. But that would have been too soon. No, this needed timing. Precision. I flagged the email. Made a note in my calendar. Because while they were busy planning check-in dates and activity schedules, I was already preparing their checkout. And this time, everyone would see it. There's something poetic about waiting. About letting people hang themselves with their own rope, slowly, carelessly, while they smile and think they're the ones in control. I didn't reply to Dale's email. Not then. Not when Lydia sent 2 follow-ups asking if anyone had gotten in touch with the resort. Not when my cousin Greg chimed in with that cabin I stayed in had a weird water pressure issue, but otherwise it was great. We should book again. Not even when someone forwarded the contact info for the front desk manager, who, by the way, no longer worked there because I'd moved operations in-house. I waited. I watched. I let the group thread get bloated with suggestions about who should sleep where, which cabins needed to be next to each other, who would handle food this year, and whether or not someone could bring fireworks. I even saw someone say, let's make sure Adrian doesn't end up in the basement again, poor guy. That one made me laugh out loud. Not because they meant it kindly, but because it was the first time any of them had remembered I existed since July. I never responded. But I was watching. And planning. The opportunity came faster than expected. In November, Sarah reached out. A real message this time. Personal. She asked if I'd be willing to help plan the next reunion. She said she didn't trust Lydia not to mess it up. I asked her what she meant. Lydia already told people she's in charge of booking the resort again, Sarah said. But she hasn't even talked to anyone there. And she keeps saying it's basically free because they gave us a discount last time. I smiled. She's not wrong. I replied. It was cheap. For her. Sarah hesitated. What does that mean? I'll explain everything, I told her. But first, I need a favor. That was how the setup began. Sarah became my quiet ally. Not because she owed me anything, but because she was decent. Always had been. And unlike the others, she never talked down to me. never made assumptions. She was the only one who ever helped with cleanup without being asked. And when I finally told her the truth, that I owned the resort, that I'd bought it last spring, that I'd let them stay there without saying a word, her reaction wasn't shock. It was a quiet, stunned, "Why didn't you say something?" I told her the truth. I wanted to see what they'd do when they thought I was nobody. Sarah didn't argue. She didn't try to defend them. She just said, "All right, what's the plan?" We started small. She kept me updated on the family group chat without involving me directly. Apparently, Lydia had fully taken over reunion planning, delegating tasks, assigning budgets, even talking about hosting a surprise talent show for the kids. She was calling the event the Great Family Reset, like she was some kind of motivational speaker. But still, she hadn't actually booked the venue. She kept saying she was in talks with management and that she was negotiating a bulk rate. I waited until January. That was when the resort officially opened bookings for the summer season. And I blocked every cabin for the reunion weekend. All of them. I didn't cancel their old reservations, because they never had any. I'd kept the system closed for group bookings, and no one had noticed. And now, with just 6 months to go, the entire place was marked as fully reserved. I even added a line on the website under Notes for Returning Guests. Please be advised, the Evergreen Pines Resort is under new ownership and no longer accepts third-party reunion bookings without prior approval. I sat back and waited. In early February, Lydia emailed the resort from her personal Gmail account, posing as event coordinator for the Wexley Family Union. She asked for a quote, said they were repeat guests, and demanded the same deal as last time. My assistant forwarded the email to me with a single line, "Want me to handle this?" I shook my head. Not yet. Instead, I drafted a reply myself. Simple, polite, professional. Dear Ms. Wexley, thank you for your inquiry regarding a potential booking at Evergreen Pines Resort. Unfortunately, our property is fully reserved for the requested dates and unable to accommodate large group events during that time. We appreciate your interest and encourage you to consider alternate dates or nearby venues. Warm regards, Evergreen Pines Ownership Team. I sent it through the generic resort email, not my personal one. The next day, I got the forwarded message from Sarah. Lydia had gone nuclear in the group chat. Can you believe this? They said we're blocked out? I'm emailing the owner directly. This is ridiculous. They clearly don't know who we are. Apparently, she tried. She sent a flurry of emails asking to speak to the manager, then the regional manager, then the board of directors. She even Googled the resort's registration name and asked her husband to pull some strings through a real estate connection. All she found was a holding company. My holding company, buried under layers of LLCs. That's when she changed tactics. In late February, she told the family she had secured a backup location for the reunion, a campground about 2 hours south, with shared bathhouses and minimal electricity. Everyone groaned. A few people even started floating the idea of skipping this year altogether. Suddenly, the reunion didn't sound so fun anymore. And that's when I made my next move. I created a private booking site. It was invitation only, password protected. I designed it myself, simple, elegant, with beautiful photos of the cabins, the lake, the walking trails. And I sent the link to 12 people. Not the whole family, just 12. The ones who had never talked down to me. The cousins who kept to themselves. The uncle who once paid for my movie ticket when I forgot my wallet as a kid. The second cousin's husband who helped me set up tents at a previous reunion while everyone else got drunk. People who weren't loud, but who had always been quietly kind. Each invitation had a short message. Private event. Priority booking for friends and family. First come, first serve. Every single one of them booked a cabin within 48 hours. And just like that, the entire resort was full. Not with them. With us. The outsiders. The overlooked. The ones they barely noticed. The ones who had always felt just a little on the edge of the circle. Sarah took cabin 3 with her husband and their 2 girls. She messaged me later and said, "I haven't told anyone yet, but I cannot wait to see their faces." I told her to wait. The timing had to be perfect. In March, Lydia sent out a long, dramatic email titled, "Change of plans, please read." She explained that due to unforeseen circumstances and management turnover, Evergreen Pines was unavailable. She framed it like the resort had somehow betrayed them. She blamed the new ownership, and even implied there was a lawsuit pending, which made me laugh so hard I had to put down my coffee. Instead, she urged everyone to RSVP for the new campground venue. She tried to sell it as rustic chic, said it would bring the family back to its roots. Only 10 people replied yes. The others gave vague excuses. Too busy. Work trip. Can't make it this year. The truth? They were all coming to my version of the reunion. But they didn't tell her. Not yet. Because they didn't know the whole story. They just thought I was hosting a small weekend at the resort. A personal getaway. A casual invitation. Only Sarah knew the truth. Only she knew what was coming next. I spent the next 2 months quietly preparing. Hired a chef. Upgraded the dining hall with new furniture. Repainted the main lodge. I commissioned a custom-made wooden plaque for the lobby with a quote from my dad. You don't need to be loud to lead. You just need to know when to speak. And I had one last surprise planned. Something they couldn't ignore. Something that would bring everything full circle. So I waited. Planned. Watched the days tick down. Until finally, the reunion weekend arrived. And everything was in place. They arrived in 3 separate cars. SUVs packed tight with coolers, duffel bags, and folding chairs, like they were returning to a kingdom they still believed they ruled. It was Friday morning, just before noon. The sun was high, bouncing off the lake, and the resort was already buzzing with laughter, sizzling food from the grills, and the soft music I'd chosen for the outdoor speakers. Jazz, classy but calm, the kind of music that says, "This place is taken." They didn't get it at first. I watched from the balcony of Cabin 1, sipping an iced espresso as Lydia, Dale, and a handful of their core families parked near the front lodge. They were wearing their custom reunion t-shirts. Bright red, Wexley Family Forever, 2026, in bold cursive across the chest. I could see the moment Lydia's face scrunched up. She was looking for something. Or someone. Then she saw the sign. A small easel stood at the resort's main entrance, just beside the flower beds. On it, in clean, minimalist font, "Private event, full property reserved, the Everpine Collective." She blinked at it like it was written in code. Dale leaned in to read it. Then Greg. And slowly, the others gathered around. I could see them looking up at the lodge, then at the other cabins, most of which had doors propped open, beach towels hanging from the porches, and people inside clearly not part of their caravan. They didn't understand what the Everpine Collective meant. But they were about to. I came down slowly, wearing a collared shirt, nice slacks, sunglasses, not overdressed, just enough to look like I belonged here. Which of course I did. Every inch of this place now reflected me. The new signage, the landscaping, the black-trimmed cabin windows, the custom doormats, the elegant fire pits, all of it. Lydia spotted me first. She smiled, then laughed, striding forward like a politician working the room. "Oh my God, Adrian. What are you doing here?" She glanced back at the others. "You're staying too? You're gonna die?" They completely double-booked us. Some random corporate group or something. I kept walking until I was about 5 feet from her. Then I smiled. "No double booking," I said. "Everything's running exactly as scheduled." She blinked. "What?" I turned toward the others now gathering. Dale, Greg, a few others. This weekend was never available to the public. The entire property was blocked out months ago. Dale crossed his arms. "For what?" "Some yoga retreat." I gave a slight shake of my head. "For a private event. One that I organized." There was a pause. A weird, quiet space where no one was quite sure what they were hearing. Like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "What do you mean you organized it?" Lydia said, laugh fading. Wait, are you working here now?" I pulled something from my pocket. A folded document. I let it unfold slowly in my hands. The paper crisp, corners sharp, text clean and bold. The deed. I handed it to Lydia. She took it like it might bite her. It took her a full 10 seconds before her lips moved. This says you own Evergreen Pines Resort." I nodded. "I bought it last year. Whole place. Cabins, dining hall, trails, dock. Everything." The silence after that was suffocating. You could hear a bee buzz past. Greg chuckled nervously. "Come on. That's got to be a joke." "No joke," I said calmly. "I'm the owner. And right now, the resort is full. Invitation only. Private guests only. And your names aren't on that list." Lydia's mouth opened. Closed. Then opened again. "You can't be serious." "I am. You let us drive all the way here." "No one invited you." I cut in. "You invited yourselves. You ignored the reservation page. You assumed the world would make room for you. Again, Dale stepped forward, voice rising. Okay, look, we've got kids in the car. Food melting. This isn't funny anymore. I didn't blink. There's a gas station 5 miles east. Campground another 10 past that. You're kicking us out. Lydia hissed. No, I'm enforcing a private event. Just like any venue would. We're family, she spat. I leaned forward slightly. Exactly. That hit harder than I expected. Her eyes twitched. Dale looked away. But, Adrian, Greg piped in. I mean, couldn't we just stay the night? We brought food for everyone. Everyone. I raised an eyebrow. Or just yourselves? No one answered. Behind me, the sound of kids laughing carried from the cabins. Sarah walked into view, waved casually at me, and held up 2 mugs. Need your coffee refill, boss? I grinned. Right on time. Lydia's head snapped towards Sarah. You knew? Sarah shrugged. He invited us. Greg looked around. Wait, how many people here are family? Enough, I said. The ones who showed up to help. The ones who didn't roll their eyes at me every summer. The ones who didn't call my career a hobby. The ones who didn't stick me in a mildew-smelling basement and laugh about it over beer. Dale looked down. Lydia looked furious. You're seriously going to just… What? Embarrass us in front of everyone, she hissed. I stared at her deadpan. You did that yourselves? I'm just holding up the mirror. She looked like she was about to explode. You think this makes you powerful? You think owning some property makes you better than us? No, I said. But it means I don't have to pretend anymore. She was shaking now. Actual shaking. Whether it was rage or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. Adrian, Dale said, more carefully now. Let's be reasonable. We'll pay. We'll cover our stay. Triple, if you want. Just, don't make us leave. I held his gaze for a long time. The pleading in his eyes wasn't sadness. It was pride, cracking. No amount of money buys respect, Dale, I said. And you spent years paying in disrespect. He deflated like a balloon. Lydia, still holding the deed, let it fall to the gravel. You'll regret this, she muttered. Maybe, I said. But you'll remember it. Then I turned. Walked back up the path. I didn't need to watch them drive away, but I did. 3 SUVs. Engines grumbling. Lydia in the passenger seat, jaw clenched so tight you could have chipped granite on it. Dale gripping the wheel like it might fly off. Kids asking questions in the back seat they didn't know how to answer. I stood on the lodge steps and watched until the last car disappeared around the bend. Behind me, the resort was alive. Music, laughter, the smell of grilled vegetables and lake air. Sarah handed me my coffee and leaned on the railing next to me. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. You sure? I turned to her. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She looked out at the water. You didn't have to let them come all the way out here, you know. I did, I said quietly. They needed to see it. Not hear it. See it. She nodded. We stood there for a while, letting the moment breathe. Later that night, during dinner in the lodge, long tables filled with people who had once been footnotes in that family's narrative, I made a quiet toast. To the ones who never needed a spotlight to shine. And as glasses clinked and smiles lit up the room, I felt it, something finally settling in me. A weight I'd carried for years lifting away. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was clarity. And it was mine. The next morning, I walked down to the dock before sunrise. Coffee in hand, sweatshirt pulled tight, water like glass. I pulled out a pen and the same envelope Lydia had handed me at last year's reunion. Give whatever you can. We know things might be tight. I scribbled a line on the back, folded it, left it on the resort desk with a note that said, Return to sender. Balance paid in full. Then I walked outside, stretched my arms, and let the sun hit my face. And that's when I knew. I was never in the basement. They were.